Hola, buenos días. Es Nico.
Sometimes I see these videos of like really young boys like dating and being together, and it like makes me cry tears of joy that we've come so far even since I was that age. And like other times I see them and it makes me like so sad. Because like I feel like society stole that from me and so many of us, and it's like all I wanted at that age, and I just hated myself so much. Happy Pride.
So today, sorry, let me correct these microphones before we start. My skin is getting a little better. I'm gonna try to finish this before my dog starts barking. So essentially today I'm gonna be talking about a video. Before we start, if you like this kind of content, make sure to follow me on Patreon at patreon.com/Nico'sAesthetics for early YouTube access videos, for weekly exclusive videos, and 2 weekly live sessions if you are in third eye tier. I felt like I had to say that just because people are like, what do you mean there's a comment from 14 hours ago if you just premiered the video? YouTube early access. So yes, there are perks to getting a Patreon subscription if you want more Nico time. But other than that, twitch.tv/Nico'sAesthetics, you already know. Eventually, I'm gonna set up that live streaming soon in the Discord. So we're gonna have like a little movie session or an anime session. We'll see. Other than that, if you like thirst traps, Instagram, Twitter, Nico's Aesthetics, and if you like personality, Nico's Aesthetic. I rarely post pornography. I posted a GIF of something that you ain't even seen no genitals. You just saw cheeks and like somebody speaking, and people are losing their shit and like, Nico, you posted, girl, I get horny too. Just because I am an internet personality, quote unquote, does not mean I am asexual. I have urges just like everyone else. If you on my Patreon, y'all know I be telling all my business on Patreon. I be telling y'all way too much about my sex life. But y'all know I be doing what I do. I'm like Janet Jackson, a freak undercover. But anyways, we're already 1 minute and 30 seconds in. I'm going to get onto the topic. So the topic at hand is essentially going to be about gay dating in the gay acceptance era, and how the gay and LGBT youth of today don't understand the hurdles that we had to go through, and why this person was experiencing such trauma and reliving it in this video. Because essentially what he said was, I'm looking at this newer generation and I am more than happy that they are being able to live their lives and be happy, because that's what we've been fighting for. But I am sad because society has stolen that youth and that possibility from me. Because when we see people that are that young and thriving and having healthy gay relationships, healthy bisexual, etc. relationships, it shows that that could have been us. We could have had that emotional growth within adolescence. We would have been able to find out what our love language is, how we properly navigate through relationships. Because the thing about gay and bisexual relationships is that when it comes to man dating men, it's difficult to not only obtain but to maintain that type of relationship, just because most of the gay generations before this one, before Macklemore, blah, blah, love, whatever that song was, and the legalization of gay marriage, you had to live in secret. There was a strict code of hookup culture, because if you lived out in the open, you were blatantly discriminated, hate crimes, housing, homelessness. I remember I've had to sleep at the park before. Long story, my coming out journey was wild. Like, people don't understand, this younger generation doesn't understand that though things are getting more accepting, and that's what we were fighting for, things were really bad for the previous generation. And me going through that trauma, I grew up in a Afro-Latino Catholic home, so strictly Catholic. So I was told I was going to catch AIDS and die. I was told that I was going to burn in hell. Even until my abuela died, she still tried to get me to have sex with women. And I'm bisexual, but like I already told you about the trauma that occurred that made me identify strictly as gay with my brother and the rest of my family. So that's why I did throughout so many years. But it just goes to show that that is what we had to face. And that's not even like the half of it, because that's what I was getting during the move towards acceptance. Like, I was in high school, I think, when gay marriage got legalized. So I was there during the leaning towards acceptance and moving forward era. The people before us, first, we lost an entire generation due to the HIV and AIDS epidemic. Second, they had to live in secret and go strictly by the DL and or hookup culture code, or else they could lose their jobs, they could lose their housing, they could lose their family and friends. Like, there's a lot at risk, or at least there was a lot at risk back in those days to come out and identify as your true self. So when I saw people going, oh, he just needs therapy, and oh, I'm so tired of old gays and blah, 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 blah. First of all, if gays like him did not exist, you would not have the rights that you have. Second of all, he specifically said that this is not an issue with the younger generation, nor the benefits that they have of being able to date. It's just wishing that we got those formative years. Because if we look at it, my first real relationship was when I was like 20 to 21. I was I was young, but I had already gotten out of my adolescent years, where my straight counterparts, my heterosexual counterparts, had already begun to get engaged, get married, have kids. I mean, I'm 25 now, and my friends are getting married and having babies and like building actual families and homes. And bitch, I'm having to tell people, no, I will not give you head in the parking lot. Like, that's the kind of shit that we have to deal with as people within the LGBT community, especially the G and B sectors, because it's like, we were never taught how to properly date. When you look at most gay men, they've actively started to date other gay men and or bisexual men within their late 20s to early 30s, meaning they have had to go through their entire lives of either living in complete secrecy or being indoctrinated within hookup culture and not being able to properly commit and or navigate an adult relationship. Because once you get into adult relationships, like I said, at this age, the 25 to 30 range, heterosexual people are normally having families, they're getting married, they're buying homes, and I can barely name 2 of my gay friends that are married, let alone living in the same household as their spouse and or boyfriend, just because it's very difficult. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, because there are gay relationships everywhere. It's just not the majority. And I wish people would come to understand that. That's why when straight heterosexual people tell me, oh, you just need to put yourself out there more, oh, blase, 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 you know, you're gonna find the right one. I'm like, girl, I'm 25. I've had multiple relationships that have lasted off and on multiple years, and I'm at a point where I'm like, girl, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. I'm not chasing after that at this point, because it's just gonna stress me out. It's just not worth it at that point, because you're putting that extra energy in, and for the most part, other people your age are not where you need them to be mentally. Because that's another thing though, it's like when you date someone that is a little younger, because I dated somebody that was 21 recently, just because we clicked. That was my rebound relationship. We clicked really well. And to see someone who has actively dated throughout their youth and have had the opportunities to have relationships growing up, it really gives you perspective on where your understanding of how to navigate a relationship is. And I mean, that's not a really large gap, a 4-year gap, but that's the interesting part, because all it took was 4 years for him to have a completely different mindset and understanding of relationships than me. Just because within his era, gay marriage is already legalized. You know, you're starting to see more gay representation, Glee, Ugly Betty. What else? Do you start to see more accepting within the popular culture, such as RuPaul, Noah's Ark, Queer as Folk? You know, you're starting to see a more abundance of representation. So it's becoming more normalized, and we didn't have that. I remember I was in late high school when I first came across Glee. I didn't even relate to Kurt. I didn't even relate to Kurt because, you know, he was a very effeminate white twink. And since I came from the South, I was not allowed to be very effeminate until I gotten older and became more solidified with who I am and my finances and stuff like that. Along with me being, you know, Afro-Latino, I'm not white. So I didn't even relate to him, but it was the fact that I was able to see queer people represented on television, not as a prop, but as a proper character who has a relationship, who has goals, who has wants and needs. Like, it was important that I got that representation. So if somebody grew up on that, they're going to have a more firm foundation in who they are, and they're not going to have so much internalized homophobia and self-hate because of how they were raised. So I mean, it's just an interesting discussion that a lot of us don't talk about. And I remember I saw that video and people were dragging him, and I chose not to interact because I knew people are gonna be like, oh, you're old and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know how the new generation is. They don't actually listen to logic. They kind of just like, and like antagonize you. But I'm also a troll. So I would go back and forth. So it was just in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to engage with this. But when I saw this video pop up again, I was like, I really want to have this discussion because this man was treated unfairly. And I doubt I'm going to have like a lot of zoom ins and cuts because this is a more serious conversation that I really wanted to talk about because it affected me. You know, when I grew up, like I said, I slept on park benches before. I slept at friends' house, getting out of the home because there was so much homophobia and violence. And obviously we grew past that. And I don't really blame my family just because that's how they were raised and that was the society that we were living in. And we've moved on past that. Like my mom and my dad, they both asked me about who I'm dating and asked to meet the men that I'm dating and stuff like that. So it's just a point of understanding that times are changing. Times are not the same. So before you start criticizing and dragging people for expressing vulnerability and saying that they regret not being able to have that, because we see that it was possible if the society was different, just let them speak. Just let them speak rather than attacking them when they try to bring this up. But yeah.
And once again, a quick thank you to all my patrons on Patreon and a quick shout out to my third eye tier patrons. Your support means everything to me and helps me do this a lot more smoothly. I will also be listing this week's live stream topic in case anybody wants to join in on the fun. I will see you guys there.